Prime Minister, recently in the media we have heard or we have read that the current coalition government is doing something which the previous government was being accused of doing in terms of procurement. The situation with the, well, they give three examples which you know about. The one with the specialty hospital where the contract was awarded to someone who Mr. Ramjatan happened to be his legal representative.
Alleged legal representative.
No, he is the representative. And then recently, some donor of the coalition from New York, Long Island, has been given a $420 million contract to supply urea without going through the bidding process. And this is something that the diaspora is talking about also, whether it's true or not. Can you show some light on that, please?
Well, Dr. Jadoopat, you have raised the question, true or not. It's very easily said than verified or proven. First of all, Mr. Ramjatan has repeatedly said that he was not the lawyer of the alternative bidder for the specialty hospital. He has gone on record of saying it over and over, and no one has ever provided a proof that Ramjatan, as a lawyer, was in fact a lawyer for felons.
It was all hearsay.
He has simply brought to the fore an issue of unfairness, an issue of injustice. Is that here was someone, a company that has a proven record around the world for building hospitals, and you are giving contract to someone who had not built a glorified toilet before. It must appear on the surface unfair and an injustice. So he secured information from a member of Parliament of India because the hospital was being built on a line of credit from India. But by the manipulation of the procurement process, a company by the name of Surindra Engineering got the contract and proceeded to draw down money. Almost $1 billion Guyana dollars was drawn down, and I went there myself and I took photographs and I showed the photographs in Parliament. I said, this is what you have at the site of the specialty hospital. I call it a dirty dozen. 12 heaps of dirt. Somebody just went in with a little bulldozer, bulldozed the place and heap up the dirt, and that's where we're going to build a hospital. The man drew down the money and he escaped. They didn't know where he lived. One time they said he was in India, next time they said he was in Dubai. When Lal went as Attorney General, he got a writ and he won the case. They didn't know where to serve this order of the court, but in any case he got away, the person. So if Comrade Ramjatan has ever been right about anything, he was right about this one, because the government itself had to say that Surindra was a crook, and they got an order of court that he had already spent $900 million. You know what schools you will be able to build with $900 million if you spread them around in the communities? But he escaped. What happened is that they were a second bidder, and the second bidder showed an interest that if the contract is renegotiated, they said we want a specialty hospital, but we renegotiate the contract with India and said, okay, if you're giving $14 million to assuming it's $14 million to do the hospital, give us another $14 million to renovate the other major hospitals.
Million.
Well, it's I think it's 14 million, subject to correction. I don't like to put on these figures. US.
US. Okay.
So we got, like when you buy one and you get two, we were able to renew the interest in this a medical center, whether you call it specialty hospital or you call it an elevated, high-level, high-standard institution, we are also able to rework the arrangement to have additional sums of money to repair and renovate Sadi Hospital, West Demerara Hospital, New Amsterdam Hospital, so that other people are entitled to better care. So the former government, now the opposition, they're very agitated about this thing. This was a pet project for them because Surendra also had very good deals with them to bring in pumps to deal with agriculture. Years passed and Surendra never delivered the pump. They were involved in the packaging of sugar plant, and we are now having an investigation as to what happened to the 12 million US for this modern sugar packaging plant. So that we know Surendra had a history, and we know that there are a lot of people who are in bed with Surendra. So there's going to come out some other stories about that. So the issue of awarding contracts, we have tender board, a national tender board that make the assessment. They send the recommendation, the evaluation to the cabinet, and the cabinet will indicate whether or not it approves. Now this will remain a situation until we have the Public Procurement Commission. There will be all the procedures, but the Public Procurement Commission that we want, it is before the Public Accounts Committee in Parliament. The chairperson of the Public Accounts Committee comes from the opposition, and the opposition must now bring forward the names, because people apply. They must bring the names to the Parliament, and then we will be able to agree. With two-thirds majority, we cannot form this commission without the support of the opposition, to bring in place the 5 names who would form the Procurement Commission, so that if people feel like you're talking about fertilizer, if they felt that they were disadvantaged, that they could have given supplies of fertilizers and they were not brought in, they will go to the Procurement Commission, lodge a complaint, and the Commission has to set up a tribunal to listen to that complaint. This is a culture that we have received from the PPP government, from the Jagdev Ramakar government, which they didn't want to change at all, and we said we will dismantle it. So I don't know the specific case you're talking about. It could be a matter of details.
But the urea?
The urea, but the issue is that this government is not knowingly going to make contracts without the intervention of assessors and the intervention of tender board procedures. I believe that so far all our contracts are in keeping with the new policy, the fresh approach to have contracts advertised and to have bids received. We have received tremendous agitation from the former government, leaders of the former government, because we put a stop to what is called sole sourcing. We used to have billions of dollars of drugs and medical supplies supplied to the government with no bidding. We put an end to that. And so the government people are agitated, the cronies culture, that their friends have now been prevented from dipping their hands in the cookie jar. The cookie hands were not only coming out of the cookie jar, they were coming out with the honey, the people's money, which is the honey. And so you have things that were simulated. We had one case of H1N1, and immediately it was played up so big that we're going to have an epidemic of H1N1. And the government was told that there was a particular supplier who already brought in the drugs, so that you don't need to go for a bid-in because it is so much needed. It's an emergency that you have to do it immediately. That was the culture. They used to create the crisis. When we had one case of Zika, a former minister in the government goes to Parliament and said, we have an epidemic of the Zika virus in Guyana. I was the one who tried to shut that person up. Because why? Their friends already would have Lemacol and Panadol to supply billions of dollars worth if you declare that Guyana is undergoing an epidemic. There's no evidence of the epidemic. We probably have a few cases of the Zika virus.
Public hysteria.
And public hysteria. Yeah. And then the cronies in the region are coming out and said how this region is in short supply of drugs and the other region is short supply, to put pressure on the government to do sole sourcing. We are not going to have sole sourcing, and I'm saying this to you, Rudy, that these people out there, as Prime Minister, I don't have an obsession to go after all the mischief they talk about. You would read, just trying to throw a little dirt on the new government, they would talk about Nagamootoo House. You know, you probably read that. They said in the parliament, last year $60 million was spent on Nagamootoo House, to repair Nagamootoo House. $200 million was spent this year on Nagamootoo House. Nagamootoo lives in a village named Lilendal, Sophia Lilendal. He lives in his own house. Not a single cent of government money was spent on my house. The house they're talking about is called the official residence of the Prime Minister.
Arthur Chung used to live in that house.
Arthur Chung and Sarmines lived there for the last 23 years. And they allowed the thing to rot and dilapidate it, that the government repairing an official residence. It is 100 years old. It is a heritage building. But to make this thing, they repeat it every time, is that it is Nagamootoo House, Nagamootoo House, you know, to make the lie appear true. So they want to have a couple of things stick on the new government. And then they talk about Nagamootoo SUV, that he got an SUV. Sometimes they say $60 million for this vehicle. Then they say $100 million to the vehicle. And then they know it's a lie, because Nagamootoo does not have a $60 million vehicle or a $100 million vehicle. The vehicle he inherited were those from Sarmines. When they're going up a bridge, they got to do like this, because it can't go one way like this. It got to wobble. One we found is 13 years old. So what they decided, they found that 2014 in the budget, $23 million was voted to buy a new vehicle for the Prime Minister. I wasn't Prime Minister then. So when I came in office, they said, Prime Minister, there's $23 million in the budget for a vehicle. What would you like to have? I said, I need a four-wheel, because I am a minister, Prime Minister, who likes to go in the countryside. I want to drive and go into Blackbush Pole. I want to drive and go into Tapakuma and Red Lake and Mainstay Lake, wherever you have people in remote area, in the Rukunoni, everywhere I go. So you need a four-wheel drive. But when we found out about the money had already been misappropriated. A minister of the government took out the money and bought 3 vehicles for himself, maybe his wife, and maybe his son. And the money had to be replenished. Now, $23 million to buy the same vehicle that should have been bought, a four-wheel vehicle. None was bought for the former Prime Minister. But you have the same thing over and over, as Guyanese, you know what they say, Yogote Dal, and they're talking about the Prime Minister vehicle and the Prime Minister house, because they have nothing else that they can talk about. That in these last months, when we are trying, working around the clock to make our country clean, to make our country green, to introduce new systems of governance and accountability, they know that we are trying hard. Nowhere else, at no time in our history, did you have 2 budgets in 5 months. We brought in 2 budgets in 5 months because the last year we had only 4 months to spend $219 billion. We couldn't. The money rolled over this year. We make it at $230 billion. Now they're quarreling. The first time in over 20 years you have a budget in January. They're saying this seems to be unusual. Why you want to have a January budget? But we're going to have one in December. Because we believe that if you start your budget early, you have more money to spend. You can look after the people's affair. You could provide the bridges, the roads, the streets, the drainage system. You could provide the water supply. You could repair the schools for the people, the community center. And so you have a situation, Rudy, where we are trying to introduce systems. You're not going to see all the dramatic changes now, but you're seeing some changes. You're here, you're visiting after some time, and you move around, and you're feeling that something dramatic, something dynamic is happening in Guyana. But you have an idle opposition. Imagine here is a president, David Otter Granger. His birthday came last year, and the man said, he want no personal gift. If you all want to give me something so I can give the children in the Pomeroon who have to paddle a little canoe to come out. So the first donation came in, they gave him a boat. But when they gave him the boat, they painted the group boat in green and yellow. But you know, the AFCA,
colors.
the colors green and yellow, but they're colors of the national flag. So one boat, and then somebody decided to bring in a bus. He handed it over to the school children, green and yellow. He didn't ask them to paint it, but they probably filled it to make the president feel nice. Because there's no taxpayer money. So suddenly this thing pick up, and you have several buses donated to schools, free for the children to ride in. Several boats donated for the children to paddle in the interior area to come to school with an engine boat now. And bicycles into the interior area, and it got more excited. People throwing boots for the children to go to school, and they throw in books. And now the president said he is going to try to find some money to provide breakfast. One meal, a health meal. Every day for the children of this country.
That's quite commendable.
Now, all these things start with bees. You know, the buses, the boat, the bicycle, the boots, and the breakfast. All right? Because we remember in the previous government we had some bees. We had a lot of bees. Those are the blood-sucking bees. Now we have good bees. They have nothing to say about these things. The children are happy. The parents are happy. They're saying now, oh gosh, but why did you paint it in yellow and green? They got a problem with the color of the bus. Not a problem with what benefits these things are to the children. So I'm not going to be worried about what the opposition trying to pick out a little battle here or there with us. It's exciting that they are doing that. They're doing the work. They're all drawing salaries.
Yes.
The leader of the opposition, Mr. Jadoopat, Mr. Jadoopat works the same money that the Prime Minister gets by being leader of the opposition, because he's not taking his salary as leader of the opposition. He's taking his pension. And he gets a pension of $1.4 million a month. Plus he collects $20 million more every year to function as leader of the opposition. So he's all right. So he got to do something for his supper. So you got to talk a couple of things, and the things you're hearing is what the government is doing bad, and they're doing that bad, and the other thing bad. Good, we accept the criticism, but come forward with some suggestions how we can resolve some
constructive criticism.
Constructive criticism. But here you have an opposition that doesn't turn up when you hoist the flag of the country. They're not there. I mean, they're vexed with Granger and Nagamootoo. They can't vex with the country.
That's right.
Why they're not there? They go into parliament, they walk in, they walk out. You know, like I said, this kind of tantrum, like the little spoiled brats, they pick up their bat and they walk out, game over, when they're ready. They don't turn up to any official functions, no official receptions. We had a big meeting to give, for the first time, national awards to groups of people like the Theatre Guild, the Mushu Group, the Muslim organization, one of the Muslim organizations. In other words, we are trying to recognize groups of people for the effort to the country. They're not there. Today we are at the officers' conference of police officers to deal with the direction, giving some general guideline as to how to improve the security situation in the country. They are not there. Here is an opposition that is part of the system of governance of Guyana. If you are sincere about playing a role in the life of this country, you will start coming on the table and let us talk the problems over, let's resolve the problem over dialogue. And I have been offering this olive branch. Every time I open my mouth, I'm saying, come on board, let's talk. We want you to help in the governance because we recognize that we need national unity. And if your opposition stays away, it is sending a bad message to, say, Venezuela that wants to claim 5 weeks of your country. And if they send a signal that we're divided, it is actually inviting mischief in regards to our sovereignty.
So you're saying the opposition is actually advocating partisan politics rather than nationalistic pride?
You're right. And that's what we need to do, is to be able to put aside party politics and partisan politics and to look at the national development of our country. And we are not saying you can't criticize. We will encourage you to criticize. But at the other side, we'd like you to play a constructive role in helping to take us forward.
Mr. Prime Minister, one of the issues very often raised in the diaspora, and I think among Guyanese here in Guyana also, this is not my personal position, but this is what is circulating. It's one of discrimination. Discrimination against Indo-Guyanese in government positions. And you probably heard this yourself. The President of Guyana, President David Arthur Granger, has so many advisors, and they're all of one ethnic group. You as Prime Minister, you have personal assistants, and the majority are of one ethnic group. So the President and Prime Minister, they're saying, instead of setting examples of racial cohesion, they are the ones who are actually emphasizing
marginalization,
the racial division. So the black president has black advisors, the Indian Prime Minister has Indian advisors, and they are saying that maybe they should have a mixture. The Prime Minister should have maybe 40-60 or 50-50 Indo and other Guyanese, and the President also should have a mixture to set examples, not only for the government offices, but for the entire country, all the private enterprises, to send that as a policy of the government. I think that is something that is very much of concern to the diaspora and all Guyanese. How would you speak to our viewers on this subject?
There's no policy of racial discrimination under this government. And I cannot see any signs of racial preference. If that were so, what you said, it would have been an indictment of the government. Whether the Prime Minister has a permanent secretary who is an Indo-Guyanese. He has a chief of staff who is an Indo-Guyanese. He has a chief information, director of public information who is Indo-Guyanese. His confidential secretary is Indo-Guyanese. His financial officer is Indo-Guyanese. His typist is an Indo-Guyanese. Then you would have said, but this government is Afro-Guyanese. It is the president is practicing selective racial discrimination. Therefore, Nagamootoo should not have been allowed to have his security, many of his security people as Indo-Guyanese. And this morning when I was at the police officers conference, I was using my cell phone to take pictures. You will see the pictures. There was a reason I'm taking out the picture. It was that here it was, we were sitting at the head table, Commissioner of Police Ilal, Indo-Guyanese, Minister of National Security, Public Security, Vice President Cameron Zatan, Indo-Guyanese, Moses Nagamootoo, Prime Minister, Indo-Guyanese, David Ramarain, Public Relations Officer for the Police, Indo-Guyanese, David Granger, Afro-Guyanese, or probably mixed. When I took my
cell phone and took a picture of the officers. I spotted in my camera one Indo-Guyanese, at least in the front. And I realized that PPP had been in office for 23 unbroken years. And what we saw through the eyes of the camera, that is the truth. That the people who say that this government is practicing racial discrimination, they have a duty to explain how come they didn't put more Indo-Guyanese and people of other ethnicities in the police force. How come they didn't make them police officers?
That's a valid point.
They have no credential to criticize anyone on recruitment policy when they had an opportunity to change the ethnic balance in the police force and the army. They had 23 years to do that. I was part of that process. In the beginning, Cherry Jagan asked me to write a statement which I issued the first day we came in to the office of the president. And I issued that statement that President Jagan said that under his government there will be no recrimination, no discrimination, no marginalization. I issued that statement because he met what he met, and he realized that in this milieu of sensitive ethnicities in Guyana, you don't go and shake the boat immediately. You're creating trouble. You're dealing with an ant's nest. But one would have expected that over the years, we would have been able gradually to open up the doors to allow everyone an opportunity to participate in an essential aspect of our life, which is the security aspect of our life. So today, yes, allegations are being made, and you can see how cleverly it is being made. None of them in the parliament, when they were asking for the names of people who are working in the various ministries, the moment I started to read out the names, they said, no, we don't want the names, just the designation and the salary. Because they want to have selective information that they can capitalize on. So when they reach Ramjatan or citizenship, some other, they said read out all the names. Because all the names sounds like Thomas and Ben. But when Nagamootoo read a name, all the names will sound like Singh and Prasad. They are not interested in that. They said, don't worry the name, but they are interested in that. So they are approaching the issue of ethnicity in an opportunistic manner to do headhunting. That when Martin Carter wrote in the 60s, when they had fires in Georgetown during the disturbances, he wrote that air was on fire. H-A-I-R. It wasn't the buildings burning, it was air on fire. So they are now trying to play that racial game. It's not going to work in Guyana anymore. It's not going to work. When we came in here, of course there were people who were fighters. I took Imran Khan as the Director of Public Information, not because of Imran Khan's ethnicity. Imran Khan was a fighter for democracy, like you, Rudy, over many, many years. Over many years, you were consistent. Imran fought for change. Imran Khan was capable, so he was taken on the basis of capability. There were many people who were brought on board because of their role in bringing about change, and you want to be able to put them in place so that they help to transform our country. When Dr. Ramaya was appointed as regional executive officer, he's like the governor of Berbice, right? Dr. Ramaya is an Indo-Guyanese. But what did the opposition say? Dr. Ramaya is a quack. They call him a quack because it didn't suit their interest that Dr. Ramaya as an Indo-Guyanese holds a critical position in Region 6, which is Berbice quarantine. So they attack him.
And therefore, you'll have to see that the attack against this government itself is racial. It is very selective. And I would say this very clearly, is that you cannot shut the door out to people of a particular ethnicity. If you brought them in and you could rationalize it, that it is done because of merit, qualification, aptitude, their commitment, there must be set of criteria that you could apply to justify the recruitment policy. I'm not saying all of what we did is 100% correct. I'm not saying that you don't have some fault lines. Maybe some people went over, they crossed the line of acceptability. And if we found out that it was done in a way that is unacceptable, we will deal with it. But I can't think that we can adopt a policy to shut people out because of their race. This is, as was said by Mao Zedong once, this is a period where 1,000, 1 million flowers must bloom. And the ministers have a recruitment policy that must be fair. But I'm saying also that because I came from the AFC side of the coalition, I know of many people who came on board with the AFC who are not Afro-Guyanese. What do? Tell them that they can't get a job because they're Indo-Guyanese? Should I discriminate against Brother Harry or Abel Sitaram or Dr. Ramayo and tell them that, look, you can't work with me, or Netram or Karen Chan, who fought for change because they're Indo-Guyanese? No, I can't do that. I take them on. I was recommend that they be hired because they're fighters for change. They're social workers. They're agents for transformation of our country. And you bring them on board. That's how we must do, on the basis of people's capability and capacity, and not judge people by the text of their the color or the text of their hair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. It's a pleasure having you on the program Inside Guyana. And on behalf of our camera crew, led by Tony, Jadoopat, and Mr. Jonathan Sobrian, we want to say thank you very much for having us here. It's a pleasure. This is Dr. Rudy Jadoopat.